To guess what will happen next.
The more inspiration I get, the more my physical powers increase, and my stamina and my resistance to fatigue. You know, one can get tired, but I never get tired when I'm inspired. Never. Supposing I wanted to play for you and I were sober. Now, if I didn't feel like playing after you give me 6 or 7 drinks, don't give me 2 or 3, 6 or 7, then I'll walk to the piano myself and play you all the operas by Verdi.
So tomorrow we have to start over again.
All over, from scratch, and that's very discouraging to me.
Now,
but right now I'm happy.
When he starts playing, generally it takes about 2 hours for him to reach his peak, but he builds in a kind of a crescendo. And although he might start very sloppily and uninterestingly, by the end of the 2-hour period, he's playing like the demon incarnate, and he gains strength in his soul, and by the end of the time he doesn't shake anymore, and he can stand up without his cane, and he could pick the piano up and throw it at you. I would not be surprised if he ended his life in glory and played concerts continually, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went away and no one ever heard from him again after this week.
Critics who have heard his most recent recordings speak of Nyiregyhàzi's performance in superlative terms, and writers talk about his rediscovery after all those years as some sort of minor miracle, or at least a mystery. But to the best of our knowledge, no one has yet suggested that even at age 75, he could be the next youth culture hero. After all, Erwin Nyiregyhàzi was doing his own thing when that wasn't even socially acceptable.
Erwin Nyiregyhàzi gave his first piano concert when he was 5. At the age of 8, he played a command performance at Buckingham Palace. And by 17, he was acclaimed as the world's greatest prodigy. But in the 4 years that followed, Nyiregyhàzi was ruined as a concert pianist by bad management and his own unstable temperament. Then he began making a reluctant comeback at the age of 75. And experts say he is quite possibly the world's finest pianist. In 1920, his future was embedded in stone. His first adult haircut was announced on the sidewalks of New York with the cries of the newsboys of 13 papers. The 17-year-old prodigy had conquered the old world and was beginning on the new. The walls of concert houses on Broadway, including those of Carnegie Hall, rang to the ovations that followed his playing. The protected boy who didn't even know how to tie his shoelaces was walking in the steps of the immortals. 4 years later, in 1924, the sidewalks were silent, and his future was in ruins. It's happened to others. It's a sad tale, but an old one. So why is this man different? Why should the world concern itself with a light that flickered for so long? before flaring once more.
Erwin Nyiregyhàzi is a Hungarian musician, pianist, and genius, and he's important because his gifts, especially in the musical field, are so advanced that he must be considered in the same category with Beethoven and Chopin and Liszt and the very few elect musicians in history. He's important because he's the only musician of this caliber who came in the age of technology, whose artistry can be preserved through technology.
Another 4 years of renewal came for Nyiregyhàzi, half a century after his fall from grace. Spearheading the revival was Gregor Benko, head of the International Piano Archives, associated with the University of Maryland.
It's an amazing story. There's nothing quite like it in the history of music. He was born on January 19th, 1903 in Hungary. It was apparent from a very early age that this young boy was quite an extraordinary prodigy. In fact, he was the most extraordinary prodigy in history after Mozart and Saint-Saëns and Joseph Hoffmann. The four of them were about equal. And by the age of 6, he was touring Europe and Scandinavia, giving concerts under the patronage of a branch of the English royal family. You see, Erwin's abilities in all fields are still prodigal in the sense that he seems to know something before studying it. And he's important because his playing at the piano has the power to move people in a way no other living musician I know of has. And it's also important because not only does he have this power, but he's decided that he will give it to the world once more. Back in 1924, when he was still one of the brightest stars in the musical firmament, a number of events happened and things just started to go wrong for him. He had a manager named R.E. Johnston, who he had many disagreements with, and Erwin tried to sue Mr. Johnston. And since Erwin is the kind of personality whose slightest move is capable of causing headlines, and since there were 13 daily newspapers in New York at that time, and he was a big star, every aspect of the case was reported in the press, and when he lost, no manager would hire him.
But there were other factors involved also. Well, the general fact of mismanagement is not just a lawsuit, but once one is mismanaged, then it's very difficult to establish a reputation that has been tarnished.
He was quickly reduced to living on the shuttle train on the subway between Grand Central and 42nd Street in New York City.
When I realized that my pianistic career, so to speak, was ended, I accepted it as something inevitable against which I was powerless to do anything. In other words, I took it sort of philosophically. It didn't make me despondent. I hated poverty, but not so much the fact that my pianistic career is over. So it did not matter too much to me. It still doesn't.
And the years in between saw a series of different careers. For a while, he would play a few concerts, but never with very much success. And after a short while, I think after 10 years of trying, 12 years of trying, Erwin just gave up.
Oscar Wilde once said that when anyone disappears, he's eventually found again in San Francisco. Nyiregyhàzi was true to his muse. He was found here in the city's Tenderloin, another aging face in the district of wrinkles and lines.
He leads a very solitary life in a bare